Next, Sweden's foreign minister has signed an application declaring the country does want to join NATO. Sweden and Finland need all of the military alliance's 30 members to approve their applications. For now, Turkey says it is against the Nordic countries joining the alliance. The Turkish president has asked Finland and Sweden not to bother sending delegates to Ankara.
President of the Republic of Turkey, değerli konuklar, şimdi sizlere hitap etmek üzere Cumhurbaşkanımız Sayın...
Pazartesi günü Türkiye'ye geleceklermiş. Ya bizi ikna etmeye mi gelecekler? Kusura bakmasınlar. Yorulmasınlar. Her şeyden önce Türkiye'ye yaptırım uygulayanların bu süreç içerisinde bir güvenlik örgütü olan NATO'ya girmelerine biz evet demeyiz. Çünkü NATO o zaman bir güvenlik örgütü olmaktan çıkar, teröristlerin adeta temsilcilerinin yoğunlaştığı bir yer haline gelir.
Turkey wants Sweden and Finland to stop what it sees as support for Kurdish terrorist groups and wants export bans to be lifted. Sweden suspended arms sales to Turkey 3 years ago following Ankara's military intervention in Syria. Meanwhile, Russian President Vladimir Putin says he does not consider the expansion of NATO a threat, but has warned against the increase of military infrastructure in Sweden and Finland.
Что касается расширения Североатлантического альянса, да, это проблема, которая создается, на мой взгляд, совершенно искусственно, поскольку делается это в интересах внешнеполитических интересах Соединенных Штатов. Вообще НАТО используется как инструмент внешней политики, по сути, одной страны, но делается достаточно настойчиво, искусно и весьма агрессивно. Это все усугубляет и без того непростую международную обстановку в области безопасности.
Well, let's go live to Brussels now, where our correspondent Rosie Burchard is joining me now. Rosie, how do you think NATO is going to try and get past this current position being taken by Turkey on the issues of Sweden and Finland?
Well, dialogue really appears to be the only way ahead here. Now, Finnish President Sauli Niinistö is making an important state visit to Sweden today, and he has just been speaking to Swedish lawmakers. He said he is optimistic that Turkey will drop its opposition and that this NATO membership bid will be able to advance. But he also expressed some surprise around what he said was a hardening in Ankara's position over the last few days. He said in previous phone calls he'd held with Turkey, he had understood that Ankara was in fact on board with Finnish and Swedish NATO membership bids. Now, surprise is really the sense also here in Brussels, where NATO is headquartered. Ollie, in all the briefings I attended, there was a strong expectation that this would be a smooth and a swift accession process. This Turkish opposition was not expected, and just how they're going to overcome it in that dialogue, which will all of course be behind closed doors, is not yet known. We've heard from several ministers, for example the Canadian foreign minister saying she's directly in touch with Turkey to try and smooth some of these bilateral issues, but when she addressed the press she would not say exactly what kind of arguments she's using to try and convince Ankara. We've also heard from the German foreign minister Annalena Baerbock that she is also in touch with Turkish counterparts, but the exact arguments not yet made public. We might see some sort of deal moving forward when it comes to amendments or drops of that arms embargo that you mentioned there, but that discussion will happen behind closed doors among NATO allies. Of course, Finland and Sweden have not yet submitted that formal NATO membership bid, but there is a concern about what might happen in the period between when they formally apply to the alliance and when they are formally becoming members, at which point those security guarantees that are associated with NATO membership kick in. In the meantime, there's a fear they could be subject to some sort of retaliation from Russia, particularly when it comes to cyber or disinformation. But there is not much fear here in Brussels, Ollie, that they will be subject to any sort of military retaliation, not least because Moscow is seen as having its hands very much tied in Ukraine.
Well, on that note, Rosie, you've got defence ministers in Brussels discussing further support for Ukraine. What form might that support take?
Those talks are happening as we speak, and the expectation is that they will be moving forward with a further 500 million euros in EU funding allocated for weapons deliveries to Ukraine. That's in addition to a 1.5 billion euro pot already set aside in EU funds. Now, it should be said that prior to the invasion of Ukraine, EU funds had never been used for lethal weapons purchases. This is a model where the EU allocates funds and then member states can bilaterally send weapons and then be reimbursed afterwards by Brussels. Now, more broadly, Ollie, what I'm hearing here in Brussels is that also countries are really trying to think about the longer term. They're fearing that this war may really drag on, and they're wondering what will this mean in terms of support for Ukraine in the months that may be coming in which this war drags on. One option they're thinking about is more training for Ukrainian forces. Could that, if they're going to be sending more weapons, more modern weaponry, for example, that might include training Ukrainian forces. Now, that is something that would not likely be happening through the Forum of the European Union, but either through an initiative set up by the United States, that is Ramstein Air Base in Germany, or through NATO, or through simple bilateral cooperation. But that is certainly something they are wondering about, how to draw out this support as this war drags on. Now, however, Ollie, there is one big type of support that Ukraine really wants, on which it doesn't have clarity yet, and that is a very clear path toward membership of the European Union. The Ukrainian Defence Minister Reznikov is joining these talks today by video conference, but he would very much like to be there as one of the member states of the European Union. That is something on which the EU has not given clarity yet. EU leaders are set to discuss this at a summit in June. What Ukraine wants is a very clear signal that it will become a candidate country, is something which is dividing EU nations and on which there is not any clear decision as of yet.
Rosie Barchard live for us in Brussels. Thank you.